In My Steam Engine Playroom, Part 2. This is my second workshop and it is where I have a modest collection of steam engines. This episode shows some recent additions that I bought from a man near Milton Keynes. Please note that Stuart number 10 was not included in this particular collection. I put it in the photograph by accident. I'll tell you all about that in a future episode. It was a really long drive to Milton Keynes and back, and on the day I decided to go there were accidents on the motorway and it took 4.5 hours just to get back. And on the way back I was thinking, was it really worth the time and money to buy this collection of engines? When I sat back and looked at everything that I'd bought, I think the journey and the cost possibly was worthwhile. In the collection was this, a Willesco D20, an old one in very good condition, complete with the original box, which is not in very good condition to be honest. But I'm not bothered about that. I am not a collector and boxes really don't bother me. I generally put them in the bin. The original polystyrene packing was there, complete with the instructions, and even some old Esbit fuel tablets. I'll be steaming this Willesco D20 in a future episode. Largely in this episode I'm just going to look at the engines that I've bought. This is a curious thing. It's completely scratch-built by the look of it. I've never seen such a thing before. It's very well made, has a single cylinder, but it has 2 eccentric rods and 2 steam chests. And there's nothing mechanically wrong with it. It's extremely well made and it runs beautifully. As can clearly be seen here. In a future episode I'll probably take it apart to see how it works, but not in this one. I'm just going through the collection. This engine runs very well slowly, and it runs equally well at warp speed. Don't take my word for it, have a look. I don't know what it is and I don't know who built it, but whoever did was a really excellent model engineer. Even the exhaust pipe is tapered. This next steam engine is a commercially manufactured item and it was made by Cotswold Heritage. It's a twin-cylinder engine. It's basically 2 Perseus engines on a common bed plate and it's called a Griffon. Like the first engine, this one runs very well indeed, which was a bit of a surprise because it actually is quite stiff when you turn it over by hand. The paintwork needs some attention and I need to make an exhaust collector to pipe the exhaust away to a condenser before the steam can be piped up the chimney of the Cotswold Heritage boiler plant that I've also bought. That's all I would have to do to this engine. Apart from making the exhaust pipe though, the paintwork does need a bit of attention. These are not new engines, they've been around for some time. I think it's time for a bit of slow motion. This is running at 15% of normal speed. These model steam engines belong to the late grandfather of the man who I bought them from, and for the last few years they've been languishing in a shed, and there are traces of rust here and there on this engine. The next engine is another Cotswold Heritage model. This one is called a Cirrus, and it's a small beam engine. You can see by the size of my hand how small this engine is. It has a very unusual valve arrangement and I'm curious to see what's going on inside. Like the Griffon, this engine also runs very well indeed. I can't contain myself. Honestly, I can't help it. I have to remove this valve to see how it works. And here you can see how it works. It's similar to an oscillating cylinder engine, but instead of the cylinder oscillating, it's the valve arm that oscillates and admits and exhausts the steam to and from the cylinder. And even though the port face looks a little bit scored, the valve doesn't leak. And if it's not broken, I won't be fixing it. Here I'm pouring some oil on the valve, and as you can see the leakage is absolutely minimal. I'll turn the engine around so you can see the other side. Everything seems to be in perfect running order. There's a tiny bit of rust on the edge of the crank web wheel and I'll remove that very easily with some Scotch-Brite. This next engine is very unusual. It's a steam turbine. Obviously it's scratch built, it's not a Cotswold Heritage model or any kind of commercial model. I know that it spins because the man who I bought it from used an airline to make it spin. It's a strange thing this, but it's worth resurrecting. I do like it. Around the other side that you can't see, it has 2 steam taps and a pressure gauge fitting. The main thing is though, it runs very sweetly, and this will make a good project. I'll make a proper mounting base for it. Probably paint parts of it and make it look more presentable. And as usual, I will be videoing the transformation. The first thing I'm going to do is to see whether or not the dynamo works. Now where did I put my test meter? I'm going to backtrack to the Griffon engine. I thought it would be a good idea whilst running it on the bench to clean up the flywheel, and for this I'm using 1200 grade wet to dry sandpaper which I squirted with WD-40. Here's a health and safety warning: it's not always a good idea to do what you see me doing, and I don't recommend doing this. You could catch your hand in the spokes of the flywheel. Here I'm using a piece of kitchen roll to clean away the residue from the WD-40. Here's a photograph which contains the engines that I've just bought from Milton Keynes. The only thing I haven't featured is the boiler plant. I need to perform a hydraulic test on this before I pump any pressure into it. I might take it over to my friend Simon at the Steam Workshop and obtain a pressure test certificate. I will of course test it in my workshop first. And that concludes this episode. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my My Steam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.